In this episode, we talk to David, who discusses his childhood in rural Appalachia, Virginia, where he experienced physical, emotional, and sexual abuse from his parents, and how that influenced his approach to fathering his son today. If discussion of abuse is not for you, you should skip this one. But having said that, this is a story of perseverance, as David shares the wisdom he's gathered along the way. There's a lot to take from this episode, so buckle up. Welcome to Dad Pod. I'm Mike.
And I'm Luke. We're friends here in Madison, and we both have kids. And at least for us, becoming a dad has been transformational. We talk to all sorts of dads in all sorts of situations to learn from their unique challenges, lessons, and evolutions. The goal is simple: learn from each other to become better dads.
If you dig it, please find us on Apple or Spotify and click follow. That single click helps put us in front of more dads, which Luke would really appreciate.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Dad Pod. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today. David, who's here today, has quite the distance traveled quotient, is how I like to think of it, when we look to where he's come from versus where he is today. He grew up the son of a Mennonite father who himself was the son of sharecropper parents, and today has worked for some of the fastest growing tech companies around. He's lived across the country from New York to Virginia to Brooklyn, Chicago, and will continue his exploration. For most of his life, he was convinced he didn't want to be a dad. And today, he is, in fact, a loving father. So I'm super excited to have today with us David Beal as a guest on the Dad Pod. With that, welcome, David. So happy you're here.
Luke, thanks so much, man. It's good to be here. That was quite the intro. I have chills.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, as I kind of mentioned, your distance travel is really pretty incredible. I'd just love to start with the kind of core question here, which is talk us through your choice to be a father, as it was not necessarily a straightforward decision for you.
Yeah. I came to it roundabout, and growing up, there was never a doubt. I grew up in a small town in Virginia, and that's just what people did. You grow up and have kids and start a family and keep it going. And, I'll be 39 this year, and I have friends from high school whose kids are going into college. So it's people get an early start there. Family's really important. My family on both sides, my mom and my dad's side, are from a part of Virginia that their relatives, ancestors, whatever, have been in since the 1500s. Very uncommon to leave. We're that first sort of, I'm Welsh and Irish and, other Anglo-Saxon mud stuff, but we're kind of that first generation of settlers really to come to America, after like Roanoke Island, Jamestown, all that sort of stuff. We had a lot of people come out to Appalachia. I'm from almost Appalachia, gateway to Appalachia. Long-winded, but like you said, a lot of traveling. I was a touring musician for a lot of my 20s. I played in a lot of bands, went all over doing that. Ended up in Brooklyn, kind of for music, kind of for tech. Ended up in tech, and I've had relationships. I was actually married once before in Virginia, and I've never been in a relationship that like I would even consider bringing a kid into. I've never had a partner that I felt like I could parent with. And I think it's because I didn't feel like I deserved it. I didn't think I deserved to be a father, to have a family. My dad wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't really built for it. When I got old enough for us to be buddies, that was great. When I finally made the decision, it came to me in a couple waves. In 2019, still living in Brooklyn. I was working at Etsy at the time, and my partner and I went to Fire Island with a couple, and they had a fairly newborn. I think he had been born in February. This was probably August, so 7-8 months old. And I hadn't spent time with a baby in a long time. I'm almost 34 years old at this point. Women talk about their biological clock, but I sure as hell felt mine too in that moment. I started thinking about what is being a dad, like, to a young kid in my mid 30s, my 40s. Like, what does this look like? Like, I'm getting tired. We'll touch on this later, but I have relapsing multiple sclerosis. That's a factor too. And then, shortly after that partner and I actually moved to North Carolina together right before the pandemic. And then we were closed in together and everything kind of imploded. And I didn't know what to do. And I've gone through a lot of existential crises in my life. In fact, I think maybe my adult life up to this point has kind of just been one long one. But I felt this pull to get back to New York. I had friends there. I had people there that would help me kind of pick up the pieces and rebuild my life. I definitely, my career was floundering. I didn't really know what to do. So I got back to New York, and a couple weeks into it, I met my now wife, and we didn't have a lot to do. So we spent a lot of time with each other, and it was a psychedelic summer in Brooklyn. I'm going to be honest. That's all the rage now, but we were early adopters, and it really does open your mind and make you see things different. I think it's a shortcut to vulnerability for people that struggle with it. And a couple months into our relationship, my wife was just like, "I want a baby. Like, I want it now. I want it with you." Like, my wife and I have very compatible trauma. She comes from a family that's different than mine, but similar in a lot of ways too. And it just felt right. So I said yes. And this was, I don't know, September 2020. Uh, we got married in January of 2021, and my wife was pregnant. Our son was born in September. And yeah, so long-winded. And maybe I never made the conscious decision to be a dad. I think that maybe I just got pulled there.
Well, I think one of the things that's a great story, and it's a huge amount of ground you covered there. I know at one point you were thinking about making some decisions that would have shut that door off to you.
Hmm. Yeah.
What
So
was that like?
yeah, I mean, the partner that I was with at the time really didn't have any plans on being a mom, and she's a great woman, a great partner. I learned so much from her. Like, I would not be in the marriage I'm in, or doing anything I am without her. She was a big stepping stone, but I hate to call someone a stepping stone. She was more than that. But she let it be known that she didn't think all the burden should be on her for birth control. And where my head was at the time, I'm like, look, I have MS. Like, my mental health is in shambles. No one deserves to be my kid. No one deserves that bad of a fate. So, I looked into getting a vasectomy, and something in my gut just said no. Maybe it was just those protective nerves that you feel when you get kicked in the nuts, being like, no, don't mess with it. I like to think it's bigger than that.
Could you mentioned you didn't feel like you deserved to be a dad. Could you dig into that a little bit more?
Yeah, man. And look, I'm all about honesty, so I'm just gonna let you know that there's some darkness here. I had a really, really bad mom. She was not a bad person. She wasn't a great person, but she was a really, really bad mother. And I've struggled with that because you can tell a lot by a man by his relationship with his mom. You can tell about the husband that he's going to be by the relationship with his mom. Well, my mom was really physically and emotionally and mentally abusive to me. Physically until I grew, and one day I just realized I'm bigger. Like, she's gonna kill me if I don't stop this. I did. Um, but she had a lot of deep insecurities. She's a narcissist, definitely, borderline personality disorder, just the perfect mix of toxicity for a mother. And she really hated my dad in a lot of ways. She felt inferior to him and his family and all these other things. And she really just literally used to tell me, like, your dad holds his head up in the air. He thinks he's better. You're not. You're like me. Hold your head down. You don't have anything to say to anyone. You don't have anything, like, just stay out of the way. Like, um, and just from an early age, and can I swear, or is that okay? Or
Yeah.
okay. From an early age, I just didn't feel like I was shit. I felt like I was just the fucking dirt under, the worst person in
Hmm.
the world's shoes. And the way that I dealt with that was cynicism. I got into skateboarding, I got into punk rock. It's easy to just let go of all that when you're just angry about everything, when you hate everything, when is this establishment, is this mainstream, is this normal? Like, um, and I just lived that. I'm just now starting to, like, actually be able to like something that other people like, like
Mm.
it's crazy. I just went so far down this kind of like subversive like obsession with counterculture because it it just that's what I felt like I deserved. Like I've lived in these hipster neighborhoods for a long time, and it's like I'm starting to get a little disillusioned with it. Are we just a collection of damaged people listening to sad music by other damaged people, like paying too much money for clothes that other people threw away? And again, that's another long-winded answer. I'm good at those.
Well,
Right.
so yeah, how do you get out from under that?
Man, it's been a lot for me, and so I've done a couple things. It's in the year of our Lord 2024. What white man in his 30s is not practicing stoicism? We're all like reaching for meditations and watching what was his name, Ryan Holiday, and like all these guys that are it's great. It's great. How many ways can you say that you can't change anything except for the way that you react? That's great. So that's been huge. I did this intense therapy called neurofeedback, where you're actually like training your brain waves to like respond to each other really well. That helped a lot. I think that got me out of like fight or flight. Um, it's just been a journey. It's been a journey of mindfulness therapy. I was on antidepressants for a little bit. I know they save lives, but they didn't help me. Um,
Do, so how did you mentioned an interesting comment that we've heard before, which is your dad being more of a friend than a dad. How did that then fit into your experience and kind of like how do you process that today? Like what did you I'm most interested in kind of like how that has informed your path forward today,
yeah.
kind of in your current context.
You know, my dad struggled, and he grew up in a pretty toxic environment. He had an abusive, alcoholic father. He carried on that tradition, um, and he was a really, really good guy. And the friendship that we had later in life, and I mean, I definitely wouldn't have made it through childhood without him. I don't think he could take on the responsibility of me. I was a special needs kid. I was in a special education, uh, ADHD and trauma and all that sort of stuff. Was not in the zeitgeist in the '90s. And uh, yeah, I think back on it, and mostly I'm just grateful. I mean, how many people out there wish that they had the opportunity to be friends with their not so great dad? And I got to do that for 32 years. So, you know,
So I want to ask one more time, just were there are there certain moments that you think about with uh that were important in you not allowing this to control your life? Like it's shocking to me that it's a very it sounds to me like a very challenging environment. I that's what I'm hearing. I would imagine a lot of people could end up in jail, end up dead, end up in those types of scenarios. What were the moments that um got you into a better situation for yourself?
yeah, there's a few things. I think back to a memory, and I was about probably 6 or 7 years old, and, my dad was a really bad alcoholic, and this was right before he got sober, and, I remember one time, I don't know what had happened, but my grandfather was at my house, and my sister, my brother-in-law, I don't think my sister's been married, like, 6 times, so this is the first brother-in-law. Uh, a fight broke out, something happened, like, I'm from the South, I'm white trash, family gets to fighting sometimes, it's just a thing. But this particular time, my brother-in-law decided to go get a lead pipe out of his car. And my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, my father were fighting. And brother-in-law comes up to my dad with this lead pipe and swings it at him. My dad, he's a pretty tough dude. He just held out his hand and grabbed the pipe, like, and it broke his hand. But he took it and shoved it in my brother-in-law's face. And my brother-in-law called the police. My dad went to jail. He did 6 months for assault. And every time that we would go visit my dad in jail, I would see all these other kids seeing their dads. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I'm never going to jail. I'm just never doing that. Like, this is like, I'm never putting anyone through this. And so that was a big moment for me. And then, like I said, I got into skateboarding, I got into punk rock. I was straight edge in high school. I was straight edge till I was 22 years old. I kind of rebelled against the society that I grew up in, and that's what saved me. The other kids, they started smoking pot and drinking, and by 12th grade, I mean, I'm from Southwest Virginia, man. Oxycontins were flowing around you know, like sweet tarts. And,
Hmm.
my best friend Anthony killed himself in 2012, addiction related. Our good buddy Josh followed suit in 2014. That's too many people, and that's just two.
Hmm.
Like, I could go off in a row, but that was the first thing. And then it's just been every bad thing that's ever happened to me has just been honestly motivation. And I think the biggest thing is I don't really feel risk. My first marriage ended in 2014. I threw some shit in a trash bag and drove to New York and slept on my friend Josh's futon for 6 weeks until I found a job and could rent a room in Brooklyn and build a new life. Like, I will just pick up the pieces and reinvent. And I think if I hadn't grown up in such a traumatic and crazy environment, I wouldn't have that skill.
What was the moment like when you found out you're going to then become a dad?
And I remember very, very clearly. Um, my my wife and I had just gotten back from a trip to Virginia, and I hadn't talked to my mom. My mom died a couple years ago, but she was still alive at the time. I hadn't talked to her in years, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna marry this woman and have a baby with her. I actually wanted to see where I come from. I'm not embarrassed. I'm just gonna let it happen. And I think maybe a week later, it was a Monday morning. She got up and peed on a stick and was like, I'm pregnant. And that moment felt, I felt some stuff, but I think it went a little numb, maybe disassociated. But then when we went to the hospital and saw him on the ultrasound, man, that felt real. And I kind of just started spiraling, to be honest. I'm not proud of this man, but the first year of his life and the pregnancy, I was a piece of shit. Like, I worked, I kept the lights on, I kept us in insurance, like whatever. But like, I just slowly started checking out and numbing out as much as I could.
Do you think that there was um like, did you feel a mix of, because you had talked about wanting to be a dad, feeling the biological clock? There's all of these other influences, and I think of it as almost like you're shaking this snow globe of positives and negatives, and you're trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Could you could you just like clue me in a little bit more about the the pieces flying around in there? Because it's uh it's like amazing to me that this doesn't spiral out of control. Like, and I mean that in a positive way, but I
No.
just, I really want to go on this voyage that you were experiencing.
Yeah. You know, I'm terrible at good days. Those are hard for me. I'm really bad at like a normal, quiet, everything's okay day. I'm really good with like pressure. Like, I'm really good with crisis. I'm really good with chaos. So to be completely honest, in my like fucked up anxious attachment mind, I was like, well, Ashley's not going to leave me for 9 months. Like, she needs my insurance. She doesn't have a job. Like, and then when he was born, it was like, well, these two need me. Like, at least like someone, maybe Ashley will keep loving me because I'm her father of her son. Like, I was still thinking that way. And it like, thinking back on it, I should have been a lot more afraid than I was. I was scared. I was nervous. I was anxious. I knew my life was going to change, but I don't know. I don't know if it's maybe just hormones and like, we're built for this. Like, you get that adrenaline, you get that like kind of strength you never knew you had, or at least I do. So maybe it was a little bit of that, but yeah, I should have been a lot more afraid.
How did it change?
It still is. Like like I don't know about y'all, but like I haven't felt myself change and evolve and just been in this sort of constant state of like development, improvement since like puberty. Like it's almost like you know, my son, like I said, he'll be 3 in September. His conscious memory is starting. He's starting to kind of remember things and things that he might take into adulthood. And all I can say is thank God. Because like I just now am in a place now where I wouldn't be ashamed for him to like have long-term memories of me.
So you've talked about it a little bit, in some of these stories of your past, how you were brought up, a little bit about your mom and your dad, and you've talked about your own evolution. How are you parenting your kid today that's different from the way you were brought up? And would love to hear like the active parts of that. What are you actively bringing? What are you actively discarding?
Yeah.
But yeah, how's it different for you?
Oh man, it's a lot different. For one, like I'm parenting my child, and I don't know that my parents did that. They clothed me and fed me to a certain extent. I was always a hungry kid, uh, and gave me a place to live, or at least my grandparents behind the scenes were really the ones doing that. Um, I'm taking responsibility. I'm taking responsibility for my son. I'm the first man that he'll ever know. I'm the archetype of what being a man means. And there's obviously Bo could grow up and decide to not be a man, to be non-binary or trans or whatever. But until then, I'm assuming that me being a good male role model is important. And so the way that we're parenting is very, I like to think of it as kind of holistic. We're taking a lot of cues from different, methodologies and paradigms. And I'll be honest, I've read some parenting books, I've listened to some podcasts, but I can't say that I'm like dogmatic about one style of parenting. Bo's really smart, and he's kind of led us from the very beginning. He really lets us know what he needs. He's really good about asserting his needs and his feelings. We use these feelings puppets, and if he's throwing a tantrum or sad or whatever, like he can really express his emotions through that. And actually, Ashley and I got in a little fight today, and he went and got the feelings puppets and made us express our feelings to each other, and it fucking helped. So, uh, a lot of that, I mean, man, nutrition and is huge. Like we're a food family. We love to eat. We love to cook. You know, we're feeding him well. We're putting a lot of love into meals and into food and nutrition. I think that I'm trying to think about all the things that I have trauma with and baggage with, and just do the exact opposite.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you find um, either intentionally or unintentionally that you have pulled forward that's had a positive impact in how
You
you're
mean
fathering your son?
you mean pulled forward as in like maybe pulled from my past or
Yeah.
yeah, I hear my dad's voice and words coming out of my mouth all the time, man. Like there's a lot that and I just got back from the South, spending some time with my uncles and my cousins, and got to see my grandma, and my sister, and it was a lot, there was a lot of healing. There was a lot of like making peace, and my mom's not there anymore. She died. She can't hurt me. My dad also died, unfortunately. I'd love for him to be a grandpa and to get to see I think he would have made a exponentially better grandfather than father. But I I definitely, you know, I have pretty good manners. I'm Southern. I'm trying to bring that on. I want my son to know where he came from. I want him to know that like, his grandparents on both sides were sharecroppers. We come from, poor Appalachian-ish Virginian stock. Um, and I think that I'm bringing some of those values and traditions that I grew up with into our family. And, I got a good dad voice. It sounds like my dad. I can, if Bo's acting up, uh, I can definitely get in line if I need to. So yeah, I'm bringing some things forward there. I part of the good news to anyone with a past, and this has just been incredible for me, is like my childhood and my family and the way that I was parented and all that sort of stuff, it seemed a lot worse than it was. And when you go and you actually just
Mm.
start to think about it, put it all together, no matter who you are, you're going to be able to find good times. You're going to be able to find like things that were of value that you learned from. It's just really scary to actually confront it and like kind of put it all on paper. If you want to journal or talk to a therapist, go to a group, any of that sort of stuff. And so yeah, I've been able to mine my childhood for some gold, and it's there.
When you think about your son's kind of his life so far, when you look back to, the almost 3 years, particularly earlier on, are there, what was surprising to you as a father?
Man, a couple of things. I was not as tired as I thought I would be. We didn't sleep. Like he's a pretty good sleeper. Like and frankly, we had a much better time than a lot of our friends. But I don't know. You can get out of that 2 hour nap that you were in after a sleepless night and hop on a call and show value in software. It's possible. Like you can do that. And and that's been pretty incredible. I didn't realize how much more in love with my wife I would fall seeing her be a mom. That's been
Mm.
incredible.
Yeah. Did it make you reflect on what your parents may have been going through individually or, or together? Because, like, for me, it happened a bit as I got older and I realized my image of my parents transitioned from, like, at some point you realize they're just other people. Like, they're not perfect. They don't have all the answers, and I started to better empathize with their challenges and all of that.
Yeah.
And then for me, it happened again, way more massively once I had a child, and it just totally, you can now see to some extent what they may have been. You can get a better idea of what their perspective was.
Yeah.
Just as being a parent or whatever. And I'm curious, just if you saw, if it changed the way that you reflect on some of that stuff, for yourself and for, looking back on them.
Absolutely. Um, you know, I forgive my parents and I still have some feelings here and there. And I still, it still hurts, but like my dad did not have it easy, man. He was the middle kid of five. He grew up in a 2-room house in the middle of nowhere, no money, uh, generational trauma. My mom grew up with me. She grew up, spent the first part of her childhood in like a slightly bigger city, Greensboro, North Carolina, before moving to Gretna, Virginia, where I grew up. But her father he was just a fucking tyrant, man. He was the worst guy. He died when I was 10 or 9. I was 10. And he was an abuser. My mom was definitely sexually abused, and she put me in situations where I was. And I think that left to your own devices, left to your own impulses, you're just going to repeat your childhood. Like that's what you do. That her parents showed her that this is how you parent your kid. You you beat them and you hurt them and you put them in toxic situations, and she just did that. And for my dad, it was like, you're pretty hands off. You give what you can. You make a lot of excuses for yourself, and you just continue to live your own sort of selfish life. Um, they weren't doing it transgressively. They were just repeating what they were taught. And I'm just thankful that for whatever reason, I decided to stop doing that.
I have a what's it been like moving to different places? Has that had an impact on your experience? You've lived in urban areas, various parts of the country, or, like, more rural, whatever. Did that geographical change or those geographical differences impact you?
This is really interesting because yes, absolutely. And you know, I'm a pretty empathetic person, and I think that that allows you to um, kind of feel at home wherever you are, you know? So like it's never been hard for me to like go to a city, find a cool bar, start chatting with people, figure out where to eat, where to drink, who to hang out with, be invited to 2 parties and have 3 new best friends by the end of the night. And generally speaking, I've probably drank like, 5 to 10 beer and shot combos to make that happen. It's not the healthiest thing in the world, but like, you know, that was kind of my I'm a firm elder millennial, and I think a lot of us were very influenced by guys like Anthony Bourdain and whomever else. And so I kind of just took my like Jack Kerouac adventure and just went forth and did it. I've learned a lot, and when I first moved to New York, I remember thinking like, wow, like I'm finally in a place where like I'm with my equals, like intellectually, culturally, whatever. These people can hang. They understand me. They get me. And they did to a certain extent, but not completely. And then I moved here and into Chicago, and to a certain extent, I feel the same. People are a lot more guarded here. People are skeptical of people that aren't from Chicago or the area because it's kind of like, why did you move here? Like you like cold winters and crime. And I get that. But at the same time, I feel like people generally understand me, but not completely. And this past weekend, I was hanging out with some dudes who, you know, it like truly. I remember a Bill Maher quote that he was talking to a Klansman on the Jerry Springer show, and he's like, "Where you're from, they play the Beverly Hillbillies on PBS," and like these dudes were the epitome of that statement. And they grew up 2 houses down from my dad. They just loved my dad. They were going on and on about him, and there was something that really struck me. I never called my dad dad. I called him daddy. With the accent, it just worked. Like, hey, daddy, what you doing? Like, cool. And they just kept saying, yo, daddy, yo, daddy, yo, daddy this, yo, daddy that. And I was like, these guys, they've never listened to the Velvet Underground. They haven't read Infinite Jest. They don't give a shit about Paul Thomas Anderson, but they say daddy the same way that I do. And there's something to be said for that. Like they really fucking get it, like, and that was the moment where I made peace with my past. I stopped being ashamed of it, man. I am a white trash motherfucker from Gretna, Virginia. I pulled myself up. I built a tech career. I did not graduate high school. I did not go to college. I learned all this shit just trying shit. I just figured it out. So yeah, I don't know. Long-winded way of saying I learned a lot from a lot of places. It hasn't been until I remembered where I came from that I truly like accepted myself and feel like a whole identity.
I was gonna make a joke about you being of a certain archetype where I could see you as a VP candidate here. Hillbilly to tech bro.
Politics is off limits, Luke.
Yeah. I like the story, man. I don't like a lot of his politics. And frankly, I don't even know that he does. It seems like he's a good guy who's like, oh, I found a little niche that I can fit into and this works. And maybe he'll have a metamorphosis and maybe we'll see some more John McCain or George W. Bush qualities come out in him. And isn't it weird that is like a positive? Like, man, if only these guys could be more like George W. Bush and John McCain.
My mistake for bringing us there. I did want to go back and similar to your own growth as you were, this question of being in different places and helping you, helping that movement help you along the process of discovering more about yourself. I wanted to go back to your relationship with your wife and your partner. And, you said something around how having your child has, you've never been more in love with your wife. What has that evolution been for the two of you, from going from who you were to who you are to who you want to be?
Yeah.
When you look ahead, what has that been like?
Man, I don't want to speak for her, but like, I loved my wife the day that I met her. Like I walked into the backyard of a bar in Brooklyn and I saw this beautiful woman in a white dress. Obviously she was trying to tell me something. Uh, and, uh, and I was like, man, I will spend every day with her if she'll let me. And, she did. And then I pretty much have. But man, just seeing her and my son, my son looks exactly like me. He acts so much like me. And, it's really, I'm about to say something out loud that I've never said before. It's really hard. I remember when I was 7 years old, my mom left me at the grocery store. It was the first time that I remember her doing that, but I'm sure she did it plenty of times. And she probably had 2 or 3 extra Xanax that day and just forgot, whatever. I sat there for about an hour waiting for her. And I've said in therapy before that I don't feel like she ever came. Like I kind of feel like I was pretty much alone from that point on. Um, Seeing my wife be a mom and seeing Bo, the way that he smiles when he sees her, the calm that he feels when he's with her, um, it's healed a lot. It's really healed a lot. And I'm not saying like I'm projecting all my mommy issues onto my wife or or even she deserves this burden. And I'm trying to have really good boundaries about these feelings, and I almost feel guilty for them. Like, yeah, like I'm taking this beautiful relationship with my wife and son and making it about me. But it's hard not to love someone who's healing such like deep hurt and damage. So I need some spindrift.
Spindrift, please contact mailbag@dadpod.fm.
Yep. I already took my AG1, so I can't pitch that. But and we've opened up the floodgates here, boys. So let's go. Keep those questions.
Well, I really appreciate you going there. I mean, there's gonna go a little bit wonky here, but I've throughout my life I've had people argue to me that there's a version of life where you go through and you seek to find your whole self, and once you find your whole self, you can then go out and find your partner and build a family. And I've heard that argument, and I've heard another argument, which is you can never be whole until you go out and you find who that person is who makes you whole. And
yeah,
for most of my life, I've believed in the first, and I think as I've gone through my life as a dad and hearing stories like what you tell, I don't know if it's possible to be a whole version of ourselves until we witness what this kind of thing is like.
I completely agree, man. If I had waited around being whole to find a partner, I would have died a very lonely man. And there's nothing wrong with being alone. You want to learn to appreciate alone time? Become a dad. That 30 minutes in the morning is sometimes the best part of my day, but I'm really thankful when it's over. But yeah, man, I don't know that I feel whole yet. I want to, and I feel close. I deserve to feel whole, and I want to feel whole, and I think it's possible. And I can say that for certain, but I don't know that I completely feel whole, and I want to one day.
You mentioned not wanting to put your stuff on your wife, on your son. Could you talk about how, as a partnership, you and your wife have managed each other, like your trauma? You mentioned that she may have had some stuff. I think you mentioned that she had some stuff to work through. How do you manage that together? Does she participate in you processing through your background?
Oh yeah. We've had some times. We've had some tough times. You know, uh, we get in fights. We work stuff out. We're both pretty temperamental people, and I think that we're just going to be that couple that like we're going to need to like yell it out once in a while. We have gotten a lot better at shielding our son from that, and that's been huge. But yeah, we really are partners in crime, and you know, we had a little fight this morning. We're struggling every day, but at the end of the day, like, you know, I'm just so happy to, you know, have 5 minutes to catch up with myself with her in bed every night and like talk about our day. You know, like we we really get each other. We really understand each other. We have compatible trauma. I don't want to speak for her. You know, like
Mhm.
I know she's been through a lot, and I know she's working through it every day. But for me, it's like, yeah,
Is there stuff that she does for you? Like if you were going to give advice just straight from your experience to someone, to like another partner who was like, how do I support my, like, tell me how to support my partner
yeah.
in working through her trauma, like just straight from your experience, like what advice would you give me?
She's been really, really good at making me feel seen. And she's been really good at like giving me the space to like project things at her and put my issues out there. And but then she's really gotten good, especially lately, at telling me when I have to fucking stop. We have this, I call it a mantra in our family. And she'll just say, I love you, but it's getting really hard for me to stay calm right now. And nothing makes me feel better than that. You know, like growing up, there was nothing I loved more than a hug from my grandma and my granny on my mom's side. She's 95 years old. She would always hug me and she would always say everything's going to be okay. And she did that Saturday. This past Saturday. It's the first time I've felt that, you know, 20 years. But I don't know. There's just something about like a secret code to just be like, look, you are fucking out of control. Like, you've got to stop. This is just insane. You're obviously in fight or flight. You're offline. You're disassociated. Whatever. Um, I can be nice to you long enough to say this last thing, and after that, like, you know, I don't have anything left for you. And and I used to cross that line a lot. You know, she used to give me that warning and be like, "This is the last nice thing I'm going to say to you for a while." Uh, and I was like, "Oh yeah, well, let's escalate. How can I just fuck this up even more?" But, you know, over time, I'm like, man, she really loves me. The fact that she's like saying that, the fact that she's like, you know, it's getting hard for me to stay calm right now. Like, what a gift. And I'm just taking that and squandering it. And I don't do that anymore. When she says that, if I can't get myself together, I fuck off. I leave for a little bit. I go skateboarding. I do whatever. Um, and, uh, and man, that's just huge. Just boundaries. I guess that's a really long winded way of saying boundaries.
Do you individually or as a partnership have specific other ways that you, when the temperature is high, that you bring it back down? Because like you're never going to avoid getting in fights or someone being angry or frustrated or whatever. But what do you do to then come back to neutral or come
It
back to
takes
love?
Yeah, it always takes time, and that's been really hard for me. I'm very anxious attached. My wife's a little anxious avoidant. So,
What do those mean?
so anxious attached, and I'm going to paraphrase and butcher the hell out of it, but there's a lot of YouTube videos you can watch that'll explain this to you in great detail. But when you're anxious attached, you know, you get anxious, you feel abandoned, and you cling. You know, no one leaves till we figure this out. Like, we've got to resolve this right now. Like, it's life or death. If we can't figure this out in the next 5 minutes, we're definitely getting a divorce. If you don't love me anymore, like that's where I feel. And hers is like, right now, hearing your voice makes me feel like I hate you, and I need to not look at you for 2 hours, and then I'll be okay. Um,
Mm.
and that's fucking hell for me.
Mm-hmm.
And gradually, it's become a lot less hell. Um, and I'm just finding that, like, you know, sitting with discomfort and learning how to like push through it is the only path to growth. And you know, like, David Goggins, would love to hear that from me. And he'd be like, "That's great. Fucking strap 2 cinder blocks to your shoulders and run 100 miles and then set your face on fire." And that's what you need to do in order to grow. And maybe for him that's great. Maybe his hurt locker is a little deeper than mine. But for me, like, I don't need to run an ultra marathon. I just need to sit for 2 hours knowing that my wife is mad, and it's kind of comparable. And I've just grown a lot from that. Now, like, this is maybe not super healthy of me to say, but I've got a little mantra, and I'm just like, we're really happy. We have a great life. She would be crazy to leave me. And I say that to myself, and I don't know, that's confidence to me, or the beginnings of it.
Mm-hmm.
When I listen and just kind of put together where you've come from, when I look back and I see like kind of that this picture of this kid who never got picked up from the grocery store, the 7-year-old who never got picked up, to where you are today, one of the questions that keeps coming back to me is, what's the dream you have for your son? Like project into his future. What's the dream do you have for him?
Man, my dream is for him to feel safe to have a dream. I never felt safe to have a dream. I just wanted the best I could possibly get. Like, I wanted to get out of Gretna. I got out of Gretna. It was very, very incremental steps for me. There was never like, here's what you want to do. Like, here's the steps to do it. Like, all that sort of stuff. So, like, I just want him to feel like he has the support and the foundation necessary to even dream. Like, I kind of knew I wanted to work in tech when I was a kid. I got the internet pretty early. My dad had the foresight to like give me a computer and give me the internet in the late 90s. And of course, I found IRC and Cult of the Dead Cow and like all the beautiful like late 90s, early 2000s hacker culture that is the reason I work in tech. But it's not like I dreamed of it. I just had access. I didn't have anything else, but I had access to this. So like, thank God. So, I hope that Bo and other kids, as we have them, grow up in a world in our family where they just feel supported enough to like have a dream. I don't have any specifics for that. If Bo wants to be a filmmaker, I hope that I am financially solvent enough to make that happen. Because frankly speaking, as someone in the arts and creative world as well, like, if you don't have family money, if you don't have generational wealth, like, you're not going to be successful. It's just the odds are just stacked in your favor. There's edge cases, cool. There's edge cases everywhere, whatever. I didn't even know you could get student loans. Like, I grew up in such a backwoods world that I thought that you had to be rich to actually go to college. And thank God, because I would have definitely like figured out how to finish high school. I was living in my car my senior year of high school, so I didn't even, I didn't have a chance at like actually going to college, actually like doing that. I almost went in the Navy, but whatever. That's just to say, like, I didn't have a dream. I didn't think I could have a dream. I didn't think I could deserve a dream. And all I want is for my kids to just feel the complete opposite of that.
On the other side of that coin, as you look, not necessarily that far ahead, but as you look ahead, for this stage, the next stage of your son's life, what are the things that you grapple with? Or like, what do you worry about? Or what are the things you are focused on addressing for the next, this stage and the next stage?
I'm going to reach for stoicism here, and I'm going to put those into 2 categories. There's a lot of things that I worry about, that I'm concerned about, that I'm thinking about, that I have absolutely no control over. And those suck. That's the biggest category. The smallest category is the things that I do have control over. So, lately we don't own a home, we're renting. Talk about not being whole before you have a kid. Technically I'm a serf. So, so we're thinking about like, where do we want to be? Like, where are we going to buy a house? Where do we want our family to be? Do we stay in the Midwest? Do we go to the South? Like, do we go to the West Coast? Like, whatever. I have control over that. And that gives me a little bit of a sense of control over the things that I don't have control over, that I worry about, like climate change, crime, and, the economy and all that sort of stuff. So like I'm I'm trying to like come up with an algorithm. And I was a software engineer for a long time, so I guess I just think algorithmically. And I'm trying to think of like, here's the thing that I'm concerned about, right? That's my value. And I'm going to pass that value into two functions. I'm going to pass it into one function that says, uh, can I control it? Do I have control over this? Do I have any control to mitigate this concern? And if so, let's put that in column A, key value pair. Let's bring Redis into the equation. Come on, let's get full technical here. If not, let's put that in column B. And then it's just about building those algorithms. That's my first algorithm. We're gonna keep the big O on this fairly consistent. So, but then you got to build the algorithm for, okay, how do I deal with the things that I can control? Those are actually scarier than the things that you can't control. So yeah, I'm it's a work in progress, man. Like, but I worry about a lot of stuff, and uh, you know, I think that I go back to a nice little Southern colloquialism of that my dad used to say, and he said, hold out both your hands, shit in one of them, and hope in the other one, and see which one fills up first. So I'm really trying to fill up that hope hand right now.
That's good. We always like to. Oh, you got a question, Mike?
I have struggled a lot, and it has been unexpected. I have struggled a lot with the managing the things I can't control. You mentioned climate change, and that is one that I worry about a lot. And other things that I won't be able to control.
Yeah.
And it is unresolved for me. And maybe that's just part of being a parent. But I have been it was one of the many surprises at how um how much that affected me. I just wouldn't worry about stuff. And maybe that's being a dude in your 20s, middle class white man, whatever. And I had a child, get a little older, and I worry a ton now.
Yeah.
Total waste of energy in most cases. I think, let's call it 98% waste of energy. But I can't avoid it. I've struggled to avoid it. I've struggled to let that go. And I don't have a question for you or anything, but it's been a major part of my life as well.
Yeah. Do you ever wonder, and I'm just speaking about myself because I did the same. I really I've gone down rabbit holes of all these different things that are terrible in the world right now, and there's a lot of them, man. Like my social media feed is just so dark and disturbing. But I wonder if you were able to just kind of like be vulnerable and say like, what do I really get out of worrying about these things? Like, am I just distracting myself worrying about the things that I can't control because I'm afraid to take responsibility and actually change the things that I can? For me, that is 100% true. I was about to say 1000% true. I'm tired of hyperbole. It is 100% true. It's a lot easier for me to worry about climate change than it is to think like, how am I going to get my W-2s for the past 4 or 5 years together, figure out how to get my taxes sorted out so that I can get approved for a mortgage? That's easy, man. That's 2 hours of concentrated work, and calling my father-in-law's friend and trying to get a payment plan sorted and all that sort of stuff. But I've been putting it off for 2 years. But I will watch 4 hours of YouTube videos about the minutia of like why the rise of the right wing in Europe is going to change, the economic outlook in Georgia next week. Like it's really, really easy to ruminate and put time and effort into things that you can't control because it doesn't matter. Like you don't have a dog in the fight. And so yeah, it's not helpful, but it I can't tell you how to stop doing it because I can't stop doing it. But at least the awareness of it makes you feel like you're, on a path.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think there's paths for me out of it, staying as far away from social media as I can, getting out into just nature, putting my phone on the mantle, and some stuff like that. I've spent periods of my life consistent with meditation, and I think that has some positive effect in myself. But you let your grip loosen on that a little bit, and it doesn't take long for it to come back, and to come back a lot harder, and then you got to start all over again on inching your way back to equanimity, for the lack of a more mass parlance of our times.
Yeah. I think that for a long time, I thought that dealing with my problems, dealing with my trauma, dealing with my past, all that sort of stuff, um, implied that there would be some sort of like release or relief, or like it would go away, or like whatever. And it does not. None of this is going to go away. None of it. But you can stop letting it affect you. You can stop being powerless over it. You can stop like letting it cause you to enjoy your life less. Like, why should I let the fact that I had a bad childhood make not only my adulthood shittier, but my wife's adulthood and my son's childhood and my coworkers and everyone else? Like, it's really, really selfish to let your problems and the things that you're worrying about hurt other people. And I don't know. I find more and more that like the less that you think about yourself, the less that you worry about everything else. Like, are you truly worrying about climate change because of your kid, or are you worrying about climate change because you're scared shitless of the fact that you have a kid? Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah. The way we typically like to end our wrap up our podcast is by asking the last question, which is, if you had one piece of advice to give to somebody who's about to become a dad, what would that piece of advice be?
We've talked a lot about control and the things that you can control and you can't. And I think that being a parent is an incredible exercise in cognitive dissonance, because you can control the environment that your child grows up in, the way that they're parented. Do you sleep train? Are you doing, child fed weaning? Like, there's so many things. The way that you potty train a kid has so much to do with, their personality as an adult. So you have some control over that, but you got to start preparing for that moment where like all of a sudden their individuality becomes more of a factor than your influence. And I think that wrapping your head around that sooner than later is going to pay dividends in the future. And I don't think parents think about that enough. Like earlier you asked me what my dream for Bo was, and I said it was for him to have a dream. And I think that so much of being a good parent is just setting the stage for the child to kind of choose their own adventure and build their own life, and giving them the resources that they need to do it. A tech analogy that I can think of, I'm a sales engineer. I was a software engineer and a DevOps engineer for a long time, and I wasn't very good at it. I'm just going to be completely honest. I was okay at it. I like learning the stuff. I like building things and prototyping them, and big ideas. But when it comes down to like just sitting and staring at gibberish for a day, fixing one problem, and then being like, cool, let's do that again tomorrow. I just couldn't do it anymore. And so now in my job, like so much of what I do is showing people value and showing how the software that I sell can make their life easier. And I believe that it can, and I know that it can, but without trying to influence them. Because the more I influence them and try to convince them that they need this and they like it and all that sort of stuff, they're going to go in the other direction. So I just got to show them value. I got to show them what a successful engagement with our software and adaptation and implementation looks like, so that they want it. And I think that that's being a parent. Like, I want to show my son what a good marriage looks like. I want to show him what a successful career looks like. I want to show him what, a successful creative life looks like. I want to lead by example and create an environment where he's constantly inspired by, me and my wife, our friends, our family. And I think that, the more that you try to cultivate that and just try to like work on yourself, what you're doing, the space that you're taking up in the world, the better influence you'll be and the better your chances of success are. And also like define what success is. Like, what is success as a parent? Technically speaking, you're a pretty successful parent the second you make a child and it's an embryo. You're an even more successful parent when you're the mother completes the pregnancy process and gives birth. Every day that your kid wakes up in the morning and didn't starve to death, you're a pretty successful parent. And I try to really like give myself a lot of grace and think of those quick wins. My kid smiles a lot. I'm a good dad. If your kid smiles a lot, you're probably a good parent. Like, yeah, I don't know. Be kind to yourself, set your expectations, and understand that you don't really have that much control. Like, just do you and be the best version of yourself you can be, and you'll probably be a pretty good parent.
Awesome. David, thank you so much. So much ground we covered. Appreciate you so much for going those places, being open, sharing, and good luck, dude.
Thank you.
You're doing great work.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's an honor to talk to you guys and to talk about my story. I'm tired of hiding it. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of where I've come from and where I've got. And I hope that this inspires people to be a parent, because it is the best fucking thing I've ever done. Like, man,
Thank you.
I love being a dad.
All right, everybody. That's it.
Yep.
David, thank you so much.
Before you bounce, I have a quick favor. Please subscribe to the pod. Not only does Luke love juicing those numbers, but it really does help put this thing in front of more dads.
And Mike, on the other hand, just loves juicing. We also now run a listener community on WhatsApp. To join, visit dadpod.fm, and you'll see the delicious link at the top of the homepage.
Come on in, baby. We'd love to have you. Something I've marinated on is like thinking about someone who's preparing to become a dad. So let's say there's your wife is pregnant or whatever, and you know that you expect to have a baby in the future. Do you there is so much that I like, if I was going to explain to my past self, so much of it would not land. Even as like it just, and I've grappled with this idea of like, you could say all this stuff to a future dad and it might not mean anything. Like that's comes from my experience of like, I just wouldn't have understood. Interested, I want to know, but there's this like delta between like, there is no way I could have understood how I feel in certain situations today. Like you've talked about with your partner, like I have a really difficult time with drop off particularly drop off when I take my daughter to school, because for me, it brings up this moment where I was supposed to pick up my brother when he was in second grade or something. He's 8 years younger than me. Must have been, let's say, third or fourth grade. And I procrastinated and I was late. And I raced over to his school and he was out on the sidewalk by himself, standing there waiting for me. And I was super worried that he was going to get lost. And he just went out and he waited and he was standing there alone. And I can barely get through this thinking about or explaining this concept without like crying myself. Like it's one of the most shameful things that I carry with me. And I think that bubbles up when I drop off my daughter. And I would never have thought about that connection, and everything. And I'm just curious what you think about that. Like if you could go back in time and talk to yourselves, do you think the pre-dad you would have, is there anything useful that you would have like heard?
Well, first off, man, like you were a kid, that's even if you were a teenager, that's still a lot of responsibility for a kid. That's, like you had your own life, you had your adolescent hormones surging through your body. Like no one's like, man, that time.
Yeah, what were you doing while you were procrastinating, Mike? That's the
I'm
real
pretty
question.
sure I was watching MTV, like there was the 4 o'clock like Carson Daly show where they did the top 10 music videos. I'm pretty sure I just wanted to see what was number one before.
Was
TRL,
it Christina Aguilera, Genie in a Bottle? I'm pretty sure.
My favorite, my favorite TRL moment is, you remember that weird like month in the summer of 1998 when all of a sudden like Rammstein was normal? Like Du Hast was the number one video on TRL. It was like Korn, Freak on a Leash, Du Hast by Rammstein, Space Lord by Monster Magnet, and then like Christina Aguilera. That was a weird time. You think we're in like end times right now? You think like Trump is a problem? Rammstein was number one on TRL.
And 8th graders were watching it. 7th graders were watching it.
I loved it. I can still fuck with Rammstein if I was, in my club in Berlin on the right night. But no, man. Yeah. So first off, like you can go back in time and say that because he's still there, man. Your inner child's still there. This might actually be your inner teen. But like you don't need to feel ashamed. You don't need to feel pain for that. Like you should thank that inner teen. You should thank him. You should thank Carson Daly. You should thank, whatever video you were watching, whatever you were doing, eating toaster strudels and drinking Dr. Pepper like we did in the 90s. And now we all wonder why we're all sick. But you should thank him because you're probably never going to be late to pick your kid up from school ever. Like I bet you are, drop off, you're there, you're present, you're enjoying every moment. You miss her while she's gone and you can't wait to pick her up in the evening. And you'd probably feel the same way had you not experienced that as a kid, but you're just that much more conscious of it. Like, like it's a gift. It's everything that you're talking about right now is just a gift. So like, just tell, 13, 14-year-old you that it's okay. You made a mistake, but you still love him. And that mistake is helping you be a better dad today.
Yeah. Yeah. I generally agree with kind of the direction you're going with it, David. When I think about this question of like, if I went back in time and told a past version of myself, knowing myself, I'd probably tell that guy to shut the fuck up and fuck off. Like I don't, that's just kind of who I am and how I operate. And I think, when you were kind of asking that question, where I went immediately was parenting, I think, is powerful in so many ways. But one of the ways it's really powerful for me is it's really helped me understand that we can't intellectualize everything. Like not everything is a logic puzzle that we can figure out with like, what do we do in serial? What do we do in parallel? How do I break this into its components? Like being a parent is a lived, embodied experience that is not possible to describe. It is not possible to tell somebody what it's like. It is literally only possible to experience. So I don't know how much value past Luke would get other than telling future Luke to, shut the fuck up. But I think that's part of the joy of it too. is like in the moment when I project into the future, I want to do everything I can to get ready. But we don't know. Like David, I loved how one of your big themes for today was, what can we control? What can we not control? And I think that's one of the most existential parts of parenting is how little we fundamentally control. And at the same time, how much control our kids have over us. It is an asymmetric equation.
Yeah. I mean, if I could go back in time right now, there's a lot of things that I would do. I'd buy property in Brooklyn. And,
Bitcoin, baby.
2000. Yeah. I'd buy all, I remember buying a Papa John's pizza with 1 Bitcoin in 20. Like I did that. I ordered a pizza.
You could open a Papa John's franchise with that same Bitcoin.
Yep. I'd definitely buy Nvidia stock. I'd do that. But there's not a lot else that changed, man, because you got to think, if you had gone and picked your brother up on time from school that day and a drunk driver had cruised down the street at the right moment and taken you both out, then where would you be now? Like no regrets, no changes.